Hello, Soundies. Welcome to our sound for video session. Today's the 9th of October, 2022. It's good to have you all here. Hope everyone's doing well. For those in the Northern Hemisphere, enjoying a nice beginning of autumn. Let's go to our agenda and take a look at what we have going today. So today, first of all, we're going to take a look at a voiceover that I recorded just last night and walk through how I would process it. We're going to use primarily Audition and Adobe Audition and Isotope RX. Obviously, there are lots of other ways you could do this, but that's just how we're going to approach it in this particular demo. And then we also have some questions that were submitted ahead of time, so we'll take a look at those as well. Okay, and Danny's doing our switching for us today, so thank you, Danny. There she is right there. All right, well, why don't we start by taking a look at Audition here, and let me just show you where we started. So just to give you some background on what this is, so Alan Williams, who runs the Sound Speeds channel on YouTube, has a podcast that he's doing right now, and at the end of that, he has various people record the outro. And he asked me if I would do this, so I did this, and let me just... Let me pull this up here. Let me show you where we started. I just did the recording in my studio area where I have multiple sound blankets. So I have a table that I sit at with the microphone on a stand on the table. The sound blanket, there's a sound blanket actually on top of the table, so that helps prevent any sort of reflections. There are sound blankets to either side of me, one in front of me. There's a blanket on the floor. And so it's a pretty good space acoustically. And then, yeah, let's just play this back so you can hear where we started from. If you'd like to ask a sound-related question for a future episode, send a written, audio, or video question to ssp@soundspeeds.us. That's soundspeeds with an S at the end, .us. Want to record this outro? Well, you can't. I'm recording this outro. But if you'd like to record the outro for a future episode, see the details in the description below. Find SoundSpeeds on social media and online at www.soundspeeds.us. Be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications for more sound-related content. And what I mean is, if you really want to learn something, you should subscribe. I learn new things from Alan all the time. One time, I was listening to this episode, and my mind was blown when he talked about phase interactions in... Okay, just to give you some context there. So we're going to fade that last bit out. That's intentional. That's where the script ends. So we're going to just sort of phase that out to spark people's interest, hopefully. You can see, first of all, we're peaking at about minus 13, minus 12 maybe, somewhere in that range. And so that is where we're starting. Let me just go back to the raw wave file, which looks exactly like this. So the first thing I would do is we have a few things going on, and I might take a look at the spectral view, just pulling that up here. So if you're in this is the waveform panel here. And I can just pull this up here to get the spectral view. And this is not quite as detailed as it is in RX, but it gives you an idea if we have any major problems. You'd be able to see hums and stuff like that if having that visual reinforcement, which can be helpful sometimes. You can definitely detect it there. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually do the cleanup first, and then we're going to bring it back into Adobe Audition. So for cleanup, I'm going to go to RX. And I just want to make a distinction here. Adobe Audition is kind of unique in a couple of ways. Probably the biggest way is that it has, from the start, I think it actually started with this waveform editor. So in essence, you can put an individual clip in here and you can process it. You can apply all sorts of whatever effects you choose to apply. And it is basically destructive editing. And that's actually pretty useful. So first up, if you need a non-destructive workflow, make a copy of your audio files first if you're going to be doing a bunch of stuff in here, and then saving it. So that's the first thing to keep in mind. But it also, later they added this multi-track mode, which is very much similar to a more traditional digital audio workstation where you're working in I would say mostly a less destructive fashion, I guess. In other words, in most cases, you're just applying effects right on the tracks, never necessarily, well, not usually processing the individual clips, but in any case, that's where Audition is coming from. So Audition allows you to do full mixing in the multi-track mode. RX, on the other hand, and this is the thing that a lot of people kind of wish that RX did, but it's not capable of doing, is it's not for mixing. It is purely for audio processing and cleanup. So I'm going to go ahead and send this audio over to RX. And the way I did that, I came up to Effects. I came into VST3 plugins, Isotope, and then went to RX10 Connect. And then we just go ahead and click Apply to get that over into RX, and this is where we start. All right. Now, there are actually multiple takes here. I'm just going to be interested in this third take here. This is the good one that I'm going to go ahead and use. There's something interesting going on here. I don't know if you can see it really well. Let's go ahead and change the spectral view. So I go to spectrogram settings and I'm going to change it to this crazy multicolor here. There's quite a bit of low frequency stuff that's intermittent, which is weird. So we're going to have to take care of that. You can see the slightest traces of some sort of hum or something going on there too. We'll clean that up as well. I can't, usually my eyes, as we say at work, with amongst my friends there, this is searing my retinas. And so I'm going to change this back to, I think it's this one, the cyan and orange. Okay, so we're going back to that. Okay, and what I'm going to do here is just zoom in on the part that we're interested in processing here, which starts right here. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the waveform view, and the first thing I want to take care of is any sort of breaths and mouth clicks and things of that nature. So what I want to do here is I want to first check how loud we are. I can boost this up just a little bit to make it easier to work with in terms of just seeing everything. So right now it's at -27. We can, and our true peak, our true peak is really close to 0 because of these claps for sync. I'm going to go ahead and pull those down. So I'm going to pop over here to the gain, and I'm going to reduce that by 10 dB. That should do. Okay, then I'm going to come back in over here, zoom in. There we go. Okay, now I have 7.5 dB of headroom, so I can bump this to -23, no problem. Okay, so we're going to change the integrated loudness. We're in the loudness control module here. I'm going to go ahead and bump that up to -23 LUFS, so bump. And there we go. That's going to make that just a little bit easier to manage. And this is going to be for managing breaths and mouth clicks and things like that. So let's go ahead and listen through and see where we start. There was a mouth click right there, just in my voiceover. Here we go. If you'd like to ask a sound-related question for a future episode, send a written, audio, or voice. Okay, that's the bad take. If you'd like to ask a sound-related question for a future episode, send a written, audio, or video question to ssp@soundspeeds.us. That's soundspeeds with an S at the end, .us. Want to record this outro? Well, you can't. I'm recording this outro. But if you'd like to record the outro for a future episode, see the details in the description below. Okay, we've got a few things to work on. Here's a breath. So there are a couple ways to approach breaths. I generally don't cut them out. Some people like to cut them out. I don't think I don't like the sound of that. I prefer to just attenuate them some. And so typically what I will do is just highlight them, something like that. And then I'll just use this gain to drop it by, we don't need to drop it a whole lot. Maybe let's go 6 dB on that and see how that sounds. Here we go. For a future episode, send a written, audio, or we could go maybe 10 even. A question for a future episode, send a written, audio, or video question to Okay, and then there's a mouth click right in the middle here somewhere. Or video question right in here. I think that's it right there. So we're going to go grab our mouth declick. Let's see what this does. Audio or video question to audio. No, that didn't get it. I think declick might be the one we want, actually. Audio or video question to SS. It's actually, I think this is it right here. Audio or video question to SS. Output clicks only. Increase the sensitivity. We can go to, that's the default. Let's bump this up. Question to SS. Audio or video question to. Still not picking it up. Let's widen the click range. So background, what I'm trying to do is get it to identify this mouth click right in here. And maybe I haven't selected the right area yet, but there's a little bit of mouth click in there. I think it's either this right here or the first one here, one of those two, if I had to guess. So I'm using, and actually we can change our algorithms as well. I'm just going to go with single band for now, but let's, I can increase the sensitivity of the plugin. That's a detection. That's how sensitive it is at the detecting the clicks, and then click widening is how long the clicks last in milliseconds. So you can actually increase that if you need to. So let's just play around here a little bit. I'm going to stop talking and just listen back and see what I can do to kind of narrow in on what's going on here. Audio or video question to SS. Okay, let's go to a different algorithm. Audio or video question to SS. No, let's go to another one. Audio or video question to SS. I doubt the low latency will get it. Audio or video question to SS. Nope. Okay. Let's try our mouth declick instead. Actually, what we can do is switch over to the spectrogram. See, there's more low frequency than high frequency, it looks like there. Audio or video question to SS. No, that's not doing it. But not quite so low. I'm not actually hearing it. I think it maybe there's somewhere else. Question. Video question. Video question. Huh. Let's try reducing this. Audio or video question to SS. Still very much there. Or video question to SSP. Boy, that one's a tough one. Or video question. Or video question. Or video question. Okay, well, here's one thing to consider. You have to decide how much time is worth it for you. We have a question?
No. Do you want yourself on the screen?
Do I want myself? No, I don't want myself on the screen. Thank you. What I'm just saying here is that we could hunt this down for a while, or we could move on. It's pretty annoying, to be honest, to me, but the question is, how much time do we really want to spend working on that? And I'm actually even just having trouble figuring out exactly where it's at. So let me just put my headphones on. I'm going to keep searching for a bit. It's not there. Whoops. Zoom out. Ah, it's in here. Somewhere. Okay, let's go about a mouth declick. Audio or video question to oh, we got it. Render. Okay, it was hidden in here. So this is where mouth declick is really useful versus declick. Mouth declick oftentimes will not mess up the dialogue, and so it can be useful. So that actually was able to capture that. So really nice to have that feature. Okay, we're going to move on. We spent a lot of time on that one. So here we go. Video question to ssp@soundspeeds.us. That's sounds. Okay, we got another breath here. Now you might ask, why don't you just use, Curtis, the breath control plugin? Well, what I've found is I have found it's extraordinarily difficult to get that to capture all of the breaths in a really transparent way. So when I'm doing something like a voiceover like this, relatively short, I've got enough time to put some effort into it. I'm just going to come in and actually manually do this like this. So let's go ahead and do a before and after. So before sounds like this. .us. That's sound speeds. And then after is like this. .us. That's sound speeds with an S at the end. .us. Want to record this out? Okay. So breath is still there, but it's not so prominent, and it's especially not going to be prominent once we as prominent when we boost the overall levels. So we're at minus 23 LUFS right now. I know looking at Alan's videos, he usually normalizes to somewhere around minus 14 to minus 16 LUFS, so we're still going to have to boost this up quite a bit. So in any case, that's why I'm taking care of these breaths now. So, okay, let's keep on going and see what else we have to clean up. A question or video question to ssp@soundspeeds.us. That's sound speeds with an S at the end. .us. Want to record this outro? Well, there's a little, oh shoot, where'd it go? The end. .us. Here we go. So we have a breath and a click all at the same time. So I could actually come in here to instant process and declick. And well, now it's just a breath. Uncheck that. Manage the breath. Want to record this outro? Well, you can't. I'm recording this outro. But if you'd like to record another breath. Outro. But if you'd like to record the outro for a future episode, see the details. The outro for a future episode, see the details. One thing to get used to in RX is that when you're playing, when you stop, it goes back to where you started. So if you're trying to work quickly, one of the things you have to kind of train yourself to do, and I have to do this still too sometimes, is that you have to click where you want it to stop. So if it's playing, see the details in the description below. Here. Oh, there's some more nastiness, mouth clicks. Let's get this breath. For a future episode, see the details in the description below. Find sounds. Okay, ugh. So we're going to pull up that instant process declick. Take care of that and that. Oh, that was the opposite of what we wanted. There we go. Sorry about that. Still need to get that one. There we go. Fine. Okay. Now we can get that breath. Oops, undo. We have to turn off our instant process. Oh. Find sound speeds on social media and online at www.soundspeeds.us. Be sure to... see, I didn't click again. Here we go. Oh. Find sound speeds on social media and online at www.soundspeeds.us. Oh. Good grief. www.soundspeeds.us. There we go. Okay. It's funny, you get muscle memory for the place where you spend most of your time. I spend most of my time in Audition, but there's that breath. Be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications for more. Did you hear that click? Be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications for more sound-related. Oh, there are a couple things going on here. And turn on notifications for. And turn on notifications for more sound-related. Okay. Now this is tricky because notifications should have there's a C in there. It should have the K sound in it, but I have to be careful because there's also a click going on too, it sounds like. So let's go back. Notifications for it's odd.
What causes the clicks?
Notification. Okay, we're going to do an experiment. Notifications for oh, nope. Notifications for more. Where is that click? Notifications for more. Whoa. You got to turn off this instant process. That's a gotcha every time. So if you don't turn it off, you're starting to select things, trying to find where things are going wrong. That's going to create problems for you. So let's go ahead and still looking for that click. Notifications for. Okay, I think it's in there somewhere. So we're going to get the mouth declick again.
It's before the C.
It is, yeah. Subscribe and turn on notifications for more. There it is. That mouth declick saving us today. Notifications for more sound-related content. And there was a notifications for more sound-related content. Just going to keep that mouth declick up for more sound-related content. And there it takes care of that mouth noise. For more sound-related content. And what I mean for more sound-related content. And what I mean. Okay, Danny's raising her hand. Yes, Danny.
We have a couple of comments.
Okay, let's go ahead and put the comments up. We're going to switch back over to the main camera for just a minute here. Let's see what we've got. Playhead follows playback. We'll keep the playhead where you stop. It's the icon to the right of loop. Okay, so where is that? Right of loop. So if I look at my transport controls, there we go. That will actually probably be really helpful to me. And what I mean is if you really... Yeah, okay, thank you for that. Who was that? Thank you.
Brian.
Hey, Brian, thanks so much. Appreciate that.
I think it was a little...
Okay, Shoji, question is the click before the area you're focusing on. Yeah, we got that. Yeah, it was. You're right. It was indeed. And the mouth declick is doing great for us today, by the way. Love that. Christopher, you don't start with a phase rotation before leveling? Not till no, because if we do any noise reduction, that's going to whack things out of phase again, even more. So I keep that before I do the final compression. And also, if you use an EQ that is not linear phase, that will also knock the phase out some more. So, Camille, thanks so much for 2 Pinot Noir.
That's very nice.
So that's very kind.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Much appreciated.
Very much appreciated. Vincent, thank you so much. Pretty cool this. Seeing the waveform reminds me chasing down something on an oscilloscope after a fashion, indeed. Yes. And best of wishes, by the way, Vincent, on your restoration of the reel-to-reel machine there. That sounds like a really interesting project. Okay, do we have any others that we want to cover before we move on? Oh, isotope is pretty cool. So much control and flexibility, indeed. This is for the really surgical stuff. Would be crazy to even try this in the analog. You couldn't. I'm so impressed with isotope. Yeah, it's a tool that is a lifesaver in so many ways. So, okay, I'm going to go ahead and take care of this breath, and let's keep on moving. We're just about halfway, I think. So we'll get this breath right here. And what I mean is, if you really want to learn something, you should subscribe. I learn new things from Alan all the time. Go back. Subscribe. Should subscribe. I learn new things from Alan all the time. One time, we've got that thing going again. Let's declick that. Whoops, undo. Turn off declick. One time, I was listening. Then we have a breath that we're managing. I was listening to this episode and my mind was blown when he talked about phase interactions in... Okay. We're going to do that fade out that I talked about. Again, this is going to be like people are going to be listening and they're going to be like, wait, what was he going to say? Because it's going to fade out there. That's part of the script, part of the gag, if you will. And there's one more breath here we didn't capture, I think. Let's see that. Phase interaction, or maybe not. Blown when he talked about phase interactions in... Okay, not. All right, so there is our first pass through. I think we're in pretty good shape there. All right, so we can close that and that. Let's go back to our spectrogram view. We do have a fair bit of noise and we also have this, again, I don't know if that's a breath that created that. That's weird. Look at this right here. Low frequency all across that section right there. Really sort of odd. And then once I start talking, it kind of lessens some. In any case, what I'm going to do here is we're going to do just a touch of denoising. And I am just going to use the simple voice denoiser because this is a pretty straightforward one. And we're going to put it in adaptive mode, dialogue, gentle, 6 dB of attenuation. Let's see how it does. If you'd like to ask a sound-related question for a future episode, send a written, audio, or video question to SSP. Before I do that, this is sounding a little bit mid-rangey to me, and I'd like to take care of some of that. So I'm going to pull up the EQ. Now, when I was talking earlier about, with Christopher, your question about not doing the phase rotation earlier on, I'm actually doing it later on because, I'm going to turn off the high-pass filter here. There are a couple of different things. You can put this EQ that comes with RX in analog mode or digital mode. Digital mode is actually a linear phase EQ, so it shouldn't mess with the waveform symmetry, whereas the analog can. So for example, if I turn it on to analog mode and I set this high pass filter, well that's way too high, to let's say, let's go to 70 Hertz. And I'm going to go back to the waveform view so you can see what happens. So let's go ahead and apply this and watch the peaks here. Notice how they got even more asymmetric. Now I'm nearly clipping right here. Just undo that really quickly just to see the difference again. So here's without a linear phase EQ. Here's before. Now if I change it to digital, watch what happens. Go ahead and render it. It doesn't change the asymmetry at all. So that's one thing to keep in mind as well. That can make a difference. And I'm not going to apply that high pass filter just yet. What I want to do here is I think there's a bit of additional kind of resonance in the somewhere in the 1 kilohertz to 2 kilohertz. Let's go ahead and punch that up and then we'll sweep it back and forth and see where it's at. So I'm going to boost that 9 dB. There we go. Not minus 9 dB, plus 9 dB. There we go. Tighten the Q by a lot, quite a bit at least. And we're going to go ahead and play back and sweep this. Let's go ahead and see what we get here. We'll start here. If you'd like to ask a sound-related question for a future episode, send a written, audio, or voice. If you'd like to ask a sound-related question for a future episode, send a written, audio, or video question to ssp@soundspeeds.us. That's soundspeeds with an S at the end, .us. Want to record this outro? Well, you can't. I'm recording this outro, but... Okay, let me pause and explain to you what I'm doing here. So what I'm looking for is I'm looking for frequencies that are quite prominent in the mid-range here. And I know from a fact from my voice, in a lot of experimentation I've done, depending on the microphone I'm using, we're often going to pick up a lot of 1 kilohertz and a lot of 2 kilohertz. And in fact, if I move it to 2 kilohertz, I only bump it up by 90, well, only. 9 dB is quite a bit, but if you push it more than 9 dB, everything is going to start whistling. So you don't want to do it beyond that. But again, notice here, as I play this, what happens at 1 kilohertz and 2 kilohertz, and I'll do it with and without. If you'd like to ask a sound-related question for a future episode, send a written, audio, or video question to ssp@soundspeeds.us. That's soundspeeds with an S at the end, .us. Want to record this outro? Well, you can't. I'm recording this outro. But if you'd like to record the outro for a future... Okay. So what I can do from there, noting that there are some sort of resonances there at both 1 kilohertz and 2 kilohertz, I can actually just reduce it a little bit. So let's just pull that down by 3 dB. And let's open up the Q again to 2. So we get a nice kind of wide, fairly gentle. We don't got to go too crazy here. Get another band here. We'll take this one up to, I think it was around 980. And again, we'll change the Q to 2. And let's cut it by just 3 dB or so. Okay, so let me play this back and do it and then bypass it so you can hear what it sounds like with and without. Here's with. If you'd like to record the outro for a future episode, see the details in the description below. Find SoundSpeeds on social media and online at www.soundspeeds.us. Be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications for more sound-related content. And what I mean is, if you really want to learn something, you should subscribe. Okay, so you'll note how that kind of just takes a little bit of an edge off of the vocals there, which is actually helpful. A little smoother sounding, so let's go ahead and apply that. Okay, there we go. It did drop the overall level just a touch. In fact, if we come back into our loudness control, remember we set it to -23. It didn't actually affect the loudness overall, but it did bring the peaks down just a touch. But I think we're good there. Now, we have some S issues going on here too. Let's look at our de-esser here. Here we go. Okay, I'm going to pull that over here. And we're just going to start with a preset, to be honest. Let's do basic. We can actually darken, or let's control vocal sibilance. And all these these are just literally changing some of the settings here. So if you look at the default threshold is at -12. The basic reduction control, they just change those around. They change the cutoff frequencies. The cutoff frequency is below this. This de-esser is not going to do anything. It's only going to look at frequencies above this. You can tell it to act fast or slow. This is actually basically like a compressor, but only for the sibilance frequencies. So you can tell it to work a really fast attack and release or a slower attack and release. And the threshold is just when you start kind of cutting in, when it starts to make a difference there. So let's go ahead and start previewing here, and let's see what we get here. If you'd like to ask a sound-related question for a future episode, send a written, audio, or video question. Also, keep your eye right on here. This is the reduction it's doing on the S's, and that's how we can kind of tune our threshold. Question to ssp@soundspeeds.us. That's soundspeeds with an S at the end, .us. Want to record this outro? Well, you can't. I'm recording this outro. But if you'd like to record the outro for a future episode, see the details in the description below. Find SoundSpeeds on social media and online at www.soundspeeds.us. Be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications for more sound-related content. And what I mean is, if you really want to learn something, you should subscribe. I learn new things from Alan all the time. One time, I was listening to this episode, and my mind was blown when he talked about phase interactions in... Okay, so let's go ahead and apply that. Okay, and let's listen to this bit. This is after. If you'd like to ask a sound-related question for a future episode, here's before. If you'd like to ask a sound-related question for a future episode, okay. probably a little harder to hear when you have that amount of time between. But the preview and bypass, I hope, gave you a pretty good idea of the differences there. So it's just taking the edge off of those S's. You don't want to take too much off because then you end up with a lisp. You lose all the S's and it's harder to hear um, the articulation. So you don't want to go too crazy with a de-esser, but you do want to kind of just pull off the edge or the edge a little bit so that it's not too crazy. Okay, do we have any questions? Danny's going to pull a couple things up on the screen here for thoughts on the breath control plugin instead of gain reduction. I have had the hardest time getting that dialed in, especially for longer bits of audio. So I almost always, for something special like this, we go in and we do it manually. I do it manually. On my YouTube videos, I used to use breath control, and people complained that they could hear some heavy gating. And that could be, a lot of things. But what happens is if it doesn't pick up all the breaths, and so some of them get reduced and some don't, and it just is really awkward. Now, frankly, either Emma or I go in and we actually reduce them manually for our videos on YouTube too. So those are some things. I think if you're not quite so close to a mic as well, you don't get as much, the prominence of the breath seems to fall off just a little bit. But my thoughts on breath control is if I'm doing something that I really care about, I generally don't use it. And maybe it's just ignorance on my part in terms of how to set it up, but I have not been able to get it to work really reliably from breath to breath. I currently use RX9 Advanced. Do you think RX10 is worth upgrading to? Well, depends. I mean, it only has a few new features. It's not a lot. So there is a text or a speech-to-text feature, which you'll see here. Let's see. Let's do this here. Yeah, it's checking. What it's doing is taking the speech here and converting it into text, so you can actually select individual things. If that's important to you, yeah, this could make a difference for you. But I don't know. For me, it's pretty rough still. Like, it doesn't do the greatest. Like, if you'd like to ask us down relief to question for a future repast, send a. It's not. And maybe it's my articulation isn't very good. But it's my general sense is that it doesn't do really well unless someone speaks very clearly, and certain voices it works better with than others. That's one thing. There's also this this repair assistant. I don't generally use this. I usually do things manually. But if you wanted to quickly, just tell it, hey, here's some audio, learn, and tell me what I should do. So it's actually training the repair assistant right now. Let's see what it says in terms of declicking and de-essing and de-reverb and de-clipping and de-noising.
You talked about this quite a bit a few weeks ago, didn't you?
A couple of weeks ago we covered this, yeah. So it's saying a little bit of de-essing, definitely some declicking, de-noising a little bit, even a little bit of de-reverb, which it's not how I would generally approach it. So some people love this. That's great. I encourage you to try it, but it's definitely, I think, better in 10 than it was in 9. But I still don't find it, like, it's not changing my life. It's not changing my workflow in a big way. And then they've also upgraded some of the other modules to a small extent. I believe, for example, the dehum, the dynamic dehum now is made so you don't have to select a training portion of audio. You don't have to have like silence with nothing but hum and then apply it. It can actually figure that out even amidst dialogue. So that's been a little bit more advanced. So if you're cleaning up a lot of hum, that could be useful for you as well. But beyond that, I didn't find it to be a super compelling upgrade from 9. Okay, where were we? Okay, Kay Horsford. General question based on this demo, could it be that for those who might be interested in basic VO cleanup that the Isotope RX elements would be good enough? I think so, yeah. I think you could do a lot of this, and it also depends on which digital audio workstation you're using. So if you already have Audition, I think between that and RX elements, you should be in a really good spot. Definitely. Shoji, when doing surgical repair of clicks and breaths, why not just attenuate the artifact versus using Isotope? What Isotope does is it actually, for breaths, it's attenuating. So yeah, that's exactly what you can do with breaths, and that's generally what I do with breaths. With clicks, it's a little different. With clicks, the click is still there if you don't actually repair it. And what isotope is doing is it's actually changing the waveform. It's not just reducing it, it's actually changing. It's resynthesizing what it thinks should be there if there wasn't a click. So that's what it's doing. And that's the power of RX there. So that's my general thinking, Shoji. It's a good question. I wonder how much easier it would be to see this in a 3D cumulative spectral array. Everything gets so crunched in 2D. Well, I don't know. I mean, it depends on what you're looking for. But I find between the waveform view, if we go to the waveform view to the spectral view, I find between those two I can generally figure out what I need to figure out. Because what I'm doing here, for example, when I go to the spectral view, I'm looking to see if there's a noise, I want to know where that noise is in terms of frequency. And stuff at the bottom here is lower frequency, stuff at the top would be higher frequency. But I know, for example, here, I've got something funny going on. If I look at that same portion in the waveform, or the, yeah, just in the waveform view, I don't know what that is. Like a little, I don't know if it's a breath. Let's listen. Let's hear. I don't know. I'm not sure what that is. But anyway, between those two, I usually can find what I need to find. Okay. Well, let's see. Let's keep going here. We need to wrap this up here pretty quick. So let's go back. Oh, we've got another question. Shoji, great live tutorial on cleaning up VO. Thanks, you bet. Thanks, Shoji. Peter, are all clicks generated by the mouth or some from another source? I sometimes get some in my throat when I'm taking a breath. Or actually, it's probably up in my nasal area. So some is in the nasal area, some in the mouth. You can't even get some from the throat. But sometimes I get this thing where I take a breath, and there's something that happens in my nasal area that also makes a noise. So that's what some of them are as well. I keep wanting to finish one time with at Bandcamp. Yes. That's funny. All right, let's just wrap this up. We've got a little bit more to do here. I think we're pretty good there. So I think it's now time to do a little bit of denoising. So we're going to go back over to isotope. Sorry about that. Okay, so let's run through with a preview here. If you'd like to ask a sound-related question for a future episode, send a written, audio, or video question to ssp@soundspeeds.us. That's soundspeeds with an S at the end, .us. Okay, I think that's good. We're going to go ahead and apply that. Let's see what that did to our trace here. Here's before. And here's after. Not a ton, but there was just a little cleanup. When I was listening to it, it just seemed a little bit cleaner. Then I'm also going to come in here and we're going to get that EQ again. This time we're going to reset everything. Let's go back to default. I'm going to get this high pass filter on at about 70 hertz, and we are going to do a 24 dB per octave digital, and my hope is it will clean up this business here. That's especially going to affect people that are on well, actually, that's not going to affect us. That's a bad take, but the good take, that looks quite a bit cleaner there now. For people that are listening back on really, things with subwoofers and stuff, you don't want that business down there. It's just going to drive them absolutely crazy. And in some regards, those are the people you need to take care of the most because they can hear it all. So we could do another pass of that, and that's just getting us nice and clean on the low end there. Let's just listen back, make sure we're good there. If you'd like to ask a sound-related question for a future episode, send a written, audio, or video question to ssp@soundspeeds.us. Okay, I think that's going to work for us. Let's go back here. Okay. Now, let's get the loudness where we want it here. So right now we're sitting at -23.3. Again, Alan generally masters his YouTube videos somewhere around -14 to -16. Let's get around -16. And that means we're gonna need to get 7, like 7, 8.5 dB of headroom so that we can bump it up to that level. So that means we're going to need to control some of these transients and these peaks here. First though, right now I have only about 4 dB of headroom. If I come into the phase rotation and I do adaptive phase rotation, that should earn me probably another dB of headroom is my guess. Let's see what it does. About a half a dB. Okay, we'll take it. And then next I need to do some compression here. So what I need to do is come into my plugins, and I need to select my plugin. We are going to use, we can use our audio units. Okay, let's go back to manage our plugins. I don't want that. I don't want any of these. Oh my goodness, it's going to go through every single one of those. Okay, what I'm going to do is we're going to do we'll take this back to, well, wait a minute. I don't want to waste everyone's time, but I want to get out of this. How do I get? Oh, it's actually scanning for them right now. I haven't actually used this since I got the new version to do this kind of thing. Okay, so let's go ahead and send it back to Audition. So send back, let's go back to Audition, come back up to Effects, VST3, Isotope, RX10 Connect, and we will say Apply. Okay. All right, so here we have our audio. Now if I do the amplitude statistics, we're at minus 23.4, good. That's what we expected, and our true peak is minus 4.4. That's what we thought. Okay. So I'm here in the waveform view, and what I'm going to do is we're going to compress this. So again, I need somewhere around Nectar. Let's pull up our compressor. That's fine. Okay, here we go. So right now I need to manage these peaks here. So this one is peaking at minus, what, 4.5 right there. That's the biggest peak right there. And I need somewhere around 7.5. So I'm going to put the threshold for the compressor. Let's go ahead and turn the EQ off. I don't need that. Let's go to the compressor. I'm using the top of this window here. I'm going to go to maybe minus 8. Let's set our threshold to minus 8. Okay. And let's set our ratio. We can do something around, let's do 3 to 1. We're going to make a very fast attack. Fastest it'll go. We're going to start our release at around 500. We can probably shorten that, but we can start at 500. And let's listen through and see what we get here. So I'm going to pull this up and let's play and hear what we get. If you'd like to ask a sound-related question for a future episode, send a written, audio, or video question to ssp@soundspeeds.us. That's soundspeeds with an S at the end, .us. Want to record this outro? Well, you can't. I'm recording this outro. But if you'd like to record the outro for a future episode, see the details in the description below. Find SoundSpeeds on social media and online at www. Okay, that's sounding pretty good, actually. Go ahead and apply that. See, this is closer to minus 6 now. This is interesting because right here at the start, we get pretty loud. Find sounds. Ooh, sorry. We can actually you can actually manually do this sometimes. I try to do no more than minus 3 dB, but if I do that, let's see how it sounds now. Just highlighted that portion, reduced it by 3 dB. See the details in the description below. Find SoundSpeeds on social. That's actually going to work okay for me, I think. Let's scan the whole thing again. Actually, let's scan just the part that I care about, which is this bit. Okay, we have 6.5. We're getting close. We have another transient here. Let's see what this one's all about. I learn new. Okay, drop that by 3 dB. Subscribe. I learn new things from Alan all the time. Okay. Again, highlight that, scan the selection. We're at 7.5, pretty close. So what I'm going to do, I think this is our last one right here. But. So embarrassing. Okay. Drop that by 2 dB. You can't. I'm recording this outro, but if you'd like to record... Okay, where are we at now? Do we have enough headroom? No. I think at this point, right here is what we're looking at. Now, for transients like that, I'm okay limiting those just a touch. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and set the loudness now. Now, there are a couple approaches we can take. We can actually just boost this up, but I don't want to do that because I don't have a limiter set right now. So what I'm going to do is we're going to do the match loudness. So I'm going to come back to this file. I'm going to take that and drag it down into the match loudness panel here. If you don't have that, you come up to Windows, match loudness, make sure there's a check next to it. Drop it here. Now we have to get our settings for that. Pull this down and pull this up. Okay, so we want to go to, let's say, -16 LUFS. We want the max true peak at about -1.5. And this is going to do a little bit of limiter here. It's going to look ahead 12 milliseconds and release 200 milliseconds. Okay, that's good. Let's run it. Okay, now this is going to be too loud to play back here. What I'll have to do, if I play it back, you all are going to be not too happy with me. So I'm going to pull the fader down. See how it sounds now. If you'd like to ask a sound-related question for a future episode, send a written, audio, or video question to ssp@soundspeeds.us. That's okay. I think that's generally how I would approach it. So with that, let's go to the chat, see if we have any questions, and then we need to get to our, oh my goodness, we need to go to our questions that were submitted ahead of time right now. Okay, so let's do it. First up, Rob didn't have so much of a question, but a request. I'd love to hear how you might treat the clip differently if you were including it in a larger mix, say for a commercial where the voiceover needs to cut through the music, sound effects, etc., versus something destined for an audiobook or other spoken word project. Rob, let's do that next week. I think that's a great topic, and I'd love to cover that. So let's come back to that one next week. But it's a great point. What we would probably do is we would pause instead of doing the loudness normalization here after I'd done the cleanup on the voiceover. Then we would mix the music and the sound effects, get them to the kind of the right levels, and make enough of a hole in the music for the dialogue to cut through, and then we would loudness normalize at the end. So definitely be coming back to that. All right, next is, if dual mono is okay just for a podcast, lectures, etc., and don't need true stereo, which generally you don't for spoken word, are there any downsides to always using the -20 dB pad setting on the Rode VideoMic NTG? I mean, it prevents clipping, and I can always use RX9 to bring it up to a particular loudness unit's full scale level. Am I missing something, or should I just leave it at -20 dB since I only need dual mono? Okay, I think you're talking here about the Rode VideoMic NTG, and I normally wouldn't use that pad for spoken word, so I guess we need a little bit more information on what you're recording into from. Are you going USB into your computer, or are you going 3.5 millimeter out of the microphone into a camera? Give me, if you wouldn't mind providing a little bit more information. I would generally say don't use a -20 dB pad for dialogue. Generally shouldn't need it. -20 dB pad would really be for like recording really loud music concerts, things like that. So let's talk a little bit more. If you could send a little bit more information, I'll also email you back and we'll talk through that. All right, next up from Andrew, I have a question on replacing sections of audio with room tone. I edit my files with Adobe Audition and Isotope RX and then import the file into Final Cut Pro. I need to keep the length of the audio clip unaltered when doing this. I don't use time code when recording my audio. Sometimes I want to replace breaks between phrases with clean room tone, but I'm unsure of the best way to do this. Is there a simple way to cut and paste a section while I'm editing in Isotope while keeping the audio track's length unaffected? Or is there another method you recommend, such as using Audition to lay down room tone on another track to overlay sections that I've muted? Andrew, it's exactly the second one that you listed there. I don't know of a good way to do that in Isotope RX. That's, again, it's a cleaning app. It's not really made for mixing, and what you're talking about there technically falls, at least in my mind, in the realm of mixing. So that's definitely something you do in Audition. And in fact, let me just, do I have time to really, I don't know if I really have time, but yeah, we would put the room tone on a separate track. You would do some sort of fade in, and then cut the portion of the dialogue track that you want to pull out and replace with that room tone. That's basically all you do there. So, okay, with that, let's go to the chat and see what we've got going on in the chat. Mark, I always seem to have lots of reverb in recordings, even with sound blankets and boom mic placed as close as possible to subject. Tips for RX10 uses. And there's a follow-up, it sounds like. Normally end up in rooms with lousy acoustics that clients want me to use. Yeah, almost always the spaces for video shoots or filming sessions are chosen by people who care more about the visuals than the audio. So they almost always choose it based on its visual characteristics versus its audio characteristics. I always seem to have lots of reverb. Okay, so
and here's another bit.
I'm using both boom and lav to try and pick the best of the ISOs, and I'm willing to bet that in a lot of those cases, Mark, that the lav actually has less reverb on it than the boom mic does. Boom mic will almost always pick up more of the reverberation. So let's go back into RX. I don't have a great clip or enough time to really run through it in a lot of detail, but depending on which version you have, there is the dialogue de-reverb, which is the easiest one to use. The trick with de-reverb is this, and I think the strategy that I usually use is I'm just trying to take the edge off of the reverb. You're never going to remove it all. If you do, push it hard enough to remove all of it, you're going to have dialogue that sounds like the person's talking into a pillow, which is not a great sound. So I generally wouldn't do that, but the dialogue de-reverb is the easiest one to use. And I would probably, maybe 6 to 9 dB of attenuation or reduction. You can adjust the sensitivity to try and get the right amount there. You can also try some ambiance preservation. That's generally, sometimes a lot of times people are going to want to reduce that as much as possible. And then you can just experiment with the different algorithms to see which one works best for the particular clip you're working on. But that would be my first approach. There's also a, where's the other one? There's also this de-reverb here, which is a little bit more complex to set up and allows you to dial it in a little bit more, but you can start with the presets here. Maybe do some light vocal processing. And you can actually change the how it responds to the low frequencies, mid frequencies, high mids, and the highs. Again, dial in how much reduction you want to do and how much artifact smoothing you want to do. And you can also have it enhance the dry signal. In other words, what it identifies as the original signal versus the reverb, you can have it actually, I think it's actually boosting those levels of the non-reverb. So it's this one I've always found a little bit more fiddly to work with. This one is a little bit easier to work with, but again, it's a light touch is the strategy that you'll want to take here. So if you've got both of those options, I'd go with the dialogue de-reverb option. Okay. Mark, anyone know if Resolve has a similar amplitude analyzer as Audition? It does have a loudness meter, but it's not an offline meter like in Audition. So Audition, you click a button and it goes through the entire clip. In Fairlight, you actually have to play through that entire thing to get at least the integrated loudness for that clip. So it works a little bit differently. That's another thing that I like about Audition and actually RX is that it allows you to do all those calculations offline. So you don't have to listen through the whole thing. You could just click a button. It still takes some time, but it's not as long as listening to the whole thing. So I don't think that Resolve has that same thing.
Okay, here's the last one.
All right, Danny says this is the last one. From Matt. What do you think of the huge sell B&H has on Earthworks Ethos? I got a second just because It's on sale for $399. Wow, that's a really great price for the Ethos. That's the microphone, incidentally, that we're using today. It's the microphone that sounds probably closest to my voice of all of the microphones I own, including all of the ugly parts of my voice. So, yeah, that's a great deal. Thanks for alerting us, Matt. Appreciate that. That's a really good deal. $400 basically for a mic that normally is what, $700, I think. So good. Okay.
We have one more.
Okay, Danny says one more. If you have a Deity S Mic 2 and Audio Technica 4043B for indoor shoots, what would you choose, especially for a very untreated room? Would you recommend Samson CO2? Samson CO2 is a much noisier mic than the other two, so probably would not be my first choice. The 4053, oh, you mean to say S Mic 2S. And the S Mic 2S is actually a little bit on the noisier side too. I'd probably choose the Audio Technica. And you might have to do some EQ and post depending on the voice that you're recording with it. It has a little bit of a high shelf, so it tends to be a little bit on the sibilant side. So if you are working with a voice that has a lot of sibilants, you'll probably want to use a de-esser and tame those a little bit. But I would probably use the Audio Technica, would be my first choice amongst those three. Okay.
One more comment.
And one more comment. Mark and Curtis. Fairlight now does analyze the whole clip for loudness. Right-click and select Analyze. Thank you for that, Rob. So you can get that. It doesn't have all of the same stats. I think it has the true peak loudness and the loudness units full scale. It doesn't have some of the more the other metrics that Audition also has, like the dB true peak, or no, sorry, the dB RMS max, dB RMS min, so on and so forth. I don't know if those are important to everybody, but it does have a little bit more. So thank you for that reminder, Rob. I appreciate that. Okay. It's time for everybody to get out there and make some great sounds. So thanks for joining us today. Hope everything is going well for you. Hope you have a great week, and we'll talk to you again next week. Take care, everybody.